My name is Chu Ching, and I just returned from hell. It was August 30th, 8 p.m. I was sitting in the back of a taxi speeding down the highway in Luocheng. The driver kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror. He probably thought I was handsome. He'd even muttered something earlier about how I put his younger self to shame. But that wasn't why he was staring. It was my expression. He'd been driving for years, but he'd never seen anyone look quite like me. I sat there in total silence, staring straight ahead. My eyes were fixed on the darkness, looking at things he couldn't see. I was lost in memories, and it was clearly making him nervous. He finally couldn't take the silence anymore. "Hey kid, it's late," he said, trying to strike up a conversation. "What are you heading to the Dragon King Temple for? It should be closed by now." I turned my head and looked at him. I thought about it for a second before answering. "Just taking in the scenery. I haven't seen Luocheng in a long time." The driver raised an eyebrow. "So you're not a local?" He sounded a bit disappointed, probably wishing he could have taken the long route to overcharge a tourist. "I am a local," I replied. "I've just been gone for a very long time." I looked out the window at the long streets illuminated by dim yellow lamps and the Mother River rushing in the distance. My mind drifted back to my previous life. During the Age of Terror, this city was destroyed. The source of that destruction was right here, the Dragon King Temple. It was the birthplace of the Blood Essence Dragon Lord, a rank 1 calamity that terrified every spirit medium on the planet. The driver didn't see my internal struggle. He just kept chatting. "Oh, so you went away for college? Kids these days never want to stay home. They all run to the big cities. But if you ask me, Luocheng is the best." I nodded sincerely. "You're right. It really is. In my past life, this was one of the first million population cities to fall. The sheer number of ghosts and anomalies here was world-class, topped off by one of the strongest malevolent gods in existence. No other city could compare." "So," the driver asked, "how long has it been since you left for school?" "The city's developed fast lately." I thought about the timeline. "About 20 years, I think." The driver's face went blank. 20 years. I looked maybe 22 or 23 years old. If I'd been gone for 20 years, that meant I left when I was 3. He looked at me like I was an idiot. I could tell what he was thinking. Asterisk, why the hell were you acting all nostalgic and emotional when we started the trip? You were a toddler when you left? Asterisk. He gave up on the nostalgia angle. He probably thought I was mentally unstable. "So why come back now? Your parents still here?" I shook my head. "I'm an orphan, but I plan to settle down here for good." The driver's expression softened. People always have a strange way of finding sympathy for orphans. "Life must have been hard for you then, huh?" "Hard." I looked out at the night, my eyes clouding with the weight of 2 decades. Hard doesn't begin to cover it. 20 years of living on the edge. 20 years of walking on thin ice. I lost count of how many times I brushed against death, or how many people around me betrayed each other or sacrificed themselves. I had fought my way to the top. I was one step away from the throne, one step away from becoming the king of the Chu River. But at that final moment, I was stabbed in the back. That single strike destroyed 20 years of effort. It was all because of Wang Dingxia. A cold light flashed in my eyes, but I forced a smile. It's all in the past now. The future will be much more interesting. Huh, being young is great. The driver laughed, back to his cheerful self. Always so full of energy, just like my daughter. He smiled, thinking of his family. He had a wife and a kid, not rich, but happy. He had no idea that in 3 days, at midnight on September 3rd, the world would end. Countless ghosts would descend. Life and death would lose their meaning as every human was judged. You either died or you became a spirit medium, struggling to survive in the gray zones. It was only 3 days away. In fact, the changes had probably already started, but a normal person like him couldn't sense it yet. I stopped talking. The dim streetlights flickered over my hair as I stared into space again. Rebirth was an incredible thing, but even with a second chance, I wasn't certain I could survive longer than last time. I had to gamble. And in all of Luocheng, there was no better place to place that bet than the Dragon King Temple. I was going to use my human body to taming a rank 1 calamity, a ghost that would eventually become one of the strongest in the country. The driver glanced at me again and sighed. He was convinced I was crazy. He hit the gas, speeding up as we left the main urban area. The silhouette of the temple began to appear in the distance. Surprisingly, I wasn't in a hurry anymore. "You can slow down," I said quietly. "Safety first at night." The driver blinked. I sounded so normal and grounded that he started to doubt himself. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I was just drunk. But he couldn't smell any alcohol. Once you drop me off, you should go home and rest, I added. The night isn't safe. The driver felt a bit of warmth in his chest. He decided I was just a sentimental orphan who had been away from home too long. Out of a mix of guilt and his natural talkative nature, he asked one last question. So, where exactly did you come from? Where have you been living all these years? I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw it all again. The malevolent gods waiting to swallow the world. The desperate mediums. The cursed realms and the endless blood. I saw the future of humanity. I opened my mouth and whispered a single word. Hell. What? The driver stammered, sure he'd misheard me. I didn't repeat myself. I just sat back and smiled. The reason I was here was simple. The Luoqing Dragon King Temple was right in front of me. I had finally arrived. I paid the fare and pushed the car door open. Standing on the pavement, I stared at the distant, closed gates of the temple. Behind me, the driver finally snapped out of his trance. He rolled down the window, blinking hard as he watched my retreating back. Hey kid, he shouted. What's your name? I paused and looked back at him. I didn't care about his curiosity or whatever judgment he was passing. It didn't matter anymore. Still, I gave him a faint smile, a look so calm and warm it felt eerie in the dead of night. Chu Qing, I said. Chu as in the king of the underworld. Qing as in the clear blue sky. I turned away and walked into the shadows. My figure slowly dissolved into the darkness, leaving the driver frozen in place. After a long minute, he scrambled for his phone. Hello? Luoqing Police Department? I want to report a mental patient. No, I'm serious. He's definitely crazy. Fine. I get it. I didn't hear the rest. I was already moving toward my destiny. This was the Dragon Kingdom, a land with thousands of years of heritage and the deepest history on Earth. When the era of terror finally arrived, this land would birth the most powerful mediums and the most horrific ghosts. There would be rank 1 king-class entities like the kings of the 10 hells. There would also be calamities. In 3 years, the very ground I was walking on, Luoqing, would become a forbidden zone for humanity. It would turn into a literal hell on Earth. And the root cause of that destruction was the mother river of our nation, the Yellow River. Over the next few years, a calamity-rank ghost would be born here, one whose power would rank in the top 5, maybe even the top 3, in the entire country. The sky was a heavy, bruised black. The Dragon King Temple loomed ahead like a crouched predator, ready to swallow anyone who dared enter. I looked up at the structure. The monster that would eventually wipe Luoqing off the map was the very deity worshipped inside these walls, the blood-eyed Dragon Lord. It was 8:30 p.m. The temple had long since stopped accepting offerings from tourists. I circled the perimeter. The temple was tucked away in a quiet corner, and the streetlights were dim. I waited for a gap in the shadows, then scaled the wall in a few quick leaps. During the day, this place was filled with the scent of incense and the chatter of crowds. At night, it was chilling. I felt like a pair of blood-red eyes was tracking my every move from the darkness. I bypassed the gift shops and the staff dorms, heading straight for the main hall. The lingering scent of sandalwood hit my nose as I stepped inside. It was ironic. Before the era of terror, people came here to pray for rain and good harvests. No one could have guessed that this protector would become a nightmare that made the whole nation tremble. I looked up. Above the altar stood a statue with a human body and a dragon's head. Per local custom, a red cloth was draped over the dragon's head. At the turn of every month, the locals performed rituals. In ancient legends, the Dragon Lord married young girls offered as sacrifices, so the red cloth symbolized a wedding veil. In the modern world, it was just a symbolic tradition, and the cloth wouldn't be removed until the 5th of the next month. That suited me perfectly. I jumped onto the altar, standing level with the deity. Under the red cloth, the clay statue seemed to be watching me. I didn't dare look it in the eyes yet. Even if this ghost hadn't reached its peak rank 1 status, it was likely already a rank 9 entity. As a normal human, I couldn't fight it head-on. I reached out and ripped the red cloth away. A vivid, golden dragon had appeared. Unlike ordinary statues, this one had a pair of actual, physical eyeballs set into the sockets. I kept my gaze lowered. I pulled out my phone, aimed the camera at the statue's face, and snapped a photo. Then, I studied the image on the screen. The eyes looked like they were carved from blood-red gemstones. They were so lifelike it felt like the statue was staring right through the phone at me. But I knew the truth. Those weren't stones. Those were real eyes. I grew up in Luoqing. Even though I escaped before the city was destroyed in my past life, I had spent years investigating exactly how it happened. I knew the blood-eyed dragon lord better than anyone. Its power originated from those eyes. They were its true form, the reason it would eventually become a king. If I was going to gamble my life, I had to choose the ghost with the highest potential to merge with. This was my ultimate trump card for the coming apocalypse. I looked at the blood-red orbs in the photo one last time. Then I lunged. I thrust my fingers directly into the statue's eye sockets. Normally, those eyes should have been fixed in place, like the stone ball in a guardian lion's mouth. But as my fingers touched them, the orbs actually rolled back. They were trying to hide. If I hadn't been so certain of what they were, I might have missed it. The eyes had a consciousness. They were trying to evade me. But the era of terror hadn't fully manifested yet. It had its rules and its killing intent, but it didn't have its full power. It was only a few centimeters wide. It couldn't escape a desperate man. I gripped the orbs tight. I never looked at them directly, not even for a second. Even a newborn ghost has enough power to kill a defenseless human if you break its rules. The texture wasn't hard like a gemstone. It was soft, squishy, like an elastic gallbladder. I yanked them out of the sockets. I had done it. I carefully placed the two blood-red eyes into a metal box I had prepared. I didn't linger. I slipped out of the temple, caught a taxi, and headed home. By the time I sat back down on my bed, it was 11 p.m. The pale moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating my face, which was still flushed from the adrenaline and the heat of the hunt. The sight of those two blood-red orbs in the metal box helped me regain my composure. Under the pale moonlight, they pulsed with a faint, eerie crimson glow. I took a deep breath, waiting for my racing heart to steady itself. When I finally felt calm, I reached out. I touched the smooth surface of the eyes. For about 30 seconds, they continued to roll around restlessly, but then they stopped. A pair of indistinct, pitch-black pupils seemed to lock onto me, staring back from the red depths. I smiled. Without a second thought, I grabbed a fruit knife from the bedside table. I lined it up and thrust it straight into my left eye socket. A wet squelch followed. Crimson blood splashed everywhere. It felt like a broken faucet had been turned on inside my head. The sound of the blood dripping into the metal box was deafening in the silent room. Thick, hot liquid seeped through my fingers as I clutched my face. The two eyes in the box seemed to brighten as they soaked in my warm blood. The pain was agonizing. It was the kind of white-hot torture that would make most people black out instantly. My jaw was clamped shut so tight I thought my teeth might shatter, and the veins on my forehead bulged like thick cords. I forced myself to endure it. In this world, if you wanted to control the supernatural, you had to merge with it. The success rate was abysmal. Failure meant permanent disability or instant, messy death. But I didn't hesitate. The Blood Crystal Dragon Lord was one of the most terrifying entities from my past life. Right now, it was just a seed, a source of power with infinite potential and zero defenses. If I didn't have the guts to take it now, I could forget about power or survival. I picked up one of the red eyes and shoved it deep into my mangled left socket. My body convulsed. My flesh instinctively tried to reject the foreign object. Shaking, I dragged myself to the mirror and pulled my hand away. I used my remaining good eye to look at the wreckage of the other. Something was moving in there. The red orb was writhing, flipping and turning as it tried to find a way to fit into its new nest. But then, the movement became frantic. The eye seemed panicked. It started pushing outward, trying to squeeze itself out of my skull. I slammed my palm over the socket, forcing it back in. Was I failing? My face twisted into a grimace. According to everything I knew, these types of organ ghosts were supposed to have high compatibility when they were this weak. But this was the Dragon Lord. Even in its infancy, it was a god-tier horror. I wasn't anxious or disappointed. I was ecstatic. The harder it fought, the higher its potential. I pressed down harder, trying to stop its escape. Sensing it couldn't get out, the blood-red pupil suddenly surged backward, trying to burrow toward my brain. If it hit my gray matter, I'd be dead or a vegetable within seconds. But if I let it escape now, I'd never get another chance to fuse with it. I looked at the second eye still sitting in the box. It was vibrating violently, as if responding to its twin. They were a pair. They were one entity. Did I have to do both at once? If I failed, I'd be totally blind. In the coming apocalypse, a blind man was just a snack. I'd be dead within days. I didn't have time to debate. The first eye was already boring deep into my skull. I made my choice. I gripped the knife again and drove it into my right eye. The world went dark. The pain was so intense, I felt my consciousness flickering like a dying candle. I was on the verge of fainting, but my sheer willpower, forged through years of horror in my previous life, held me together. I grabbed the second orb and jammed it into the fresh wound. I couldn't see anything now. I could only squeeze my eyelids shut with everything I had, using the thin layer of skin to keep the twin horrors from leaping out. I waited. Finally, the frantic squirming slowed down. The struggle grew weaker and weaker until it stopped. I let out a long, ragged breath. With the immediate danger gone, the wall I had built against the pain finally collapsed. My mind went blank, and I slumped onto the bed, unconscious. Outside, the moonlight hit my face. Underneath my closed lids, things were moving rapidly. Deep inside the sockets, severed nerves and blood vessels were being stitched back together at an impossible speed. My original, shattered eyes were being consumed and rebuilt, wrapped in a new crimson layer. Everything eventually settled into a heavy, dark silence. While I slept, the rest of the city of Luocheng remained quiet, but in the shadows, things were beginning to stir. On the outskirts of the city sat the Beishan Cemetery. It was a desolate, crumbling place, far worse than the city's more famous graveyards. People whispered that it wasn't just ashes kept there. Many old families had buried full bodies in coffins on these hills. It was a place of heavy energy. People said it was haunted. Tonight, the air felt especially heavy. Stupid place. Can't even put up some streetlights, a man grumbled. Old Kai, a man in his 40s with no family to speak of, swung his flashlight around as he patrolled the hilltop. He talked to himself to keep the fear at bay. They call this a cushy job. Well, the pay is fine. I'm not afraid of ghosts. Actually, I hope a pretty female ghost shows up. He looked out at the dark valley below and the bright moon above. The silence was oppressive. Then he heard it. A rustling sound, coming from the shadows of the tombstones nearby. Old Kai's footsteps froze. He gripped his flashlight, the beam trembling in his hand. "Who's there?" he barked, trying to sound tougher than he felt. He swung the light toward the edge of a nearby cliff. There, perched among the tombstones, was a cat. It was pitch black, its fur blending into the night. It didn't flinch at the light or the sound of Old Kai's voice. Instead, it was doing something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up just thinking about it. The cat was standing on its hind legs like a human. Its front paws were pressed together, and it was bowing repeatedly toward the valley, its entire body shivering. It looked like it was praying to something invisible in the dark. "Crap," Old Kai exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Scared the life out of me. It's just a cat." He chuckled nervously and knelt down to grab a stone, intending to scare the creature off. But as he crouched, he caught a glimpse of something behind him. His blood turned to ice. A face was hovering less than 10 centimeters from his own. It was covered in matted, tangled hair, but as Old Kai stared in horror, he realized there were no features. No eyes, no nose, just a blank, fleshy mass beneath the hair. Suddenly, a slit ripped open in the middle of that flesh. A hollow, rasping voice crawled out. "Have you seen my face?" A scream of pure agony shattered the silence of Beishan Cemetery. The black cat finally turned its head, its glowing green eyes flickering with a hint of surprise. Then, it turned back and continued its shivering prayer, bowing to the mountain as if begging for mercy. The heavy pounding on the door made my head throb. I tried to stir, but my body felt like it had been crushed and put back together. "Chu Qing, are you dead in there?" A voice yelled from the hallway. "We're supposed to go to our internship interviews today. I've been calling you for an hour. Open up." It was Chun Wei, my roommate. His shouting was loud enough to vibrate the floorboards. "Chu Qing, man, if you don't answer, I'm calling the landlady to bring the spare key. I know you're depressed about the breakup, but this is too much." The pain in my head was unbearable, a searing, burning sensation deep inside my skull. I clutched my eyes, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The memory of the ritual flashed through my mind. I forced my eyelids open. They were crusty, stuck together with dried blood. When they finally snapped open, the world wasn't the world I knew. Everything was bathed in a deep, visceral crimson. My bed, my desk, the walls, they looked like they were draped in blood-red silk. It was eerie, but strangely, I could see every detail with terrifying clarity. It worked. I ignored Chun Wei's shouting and lunged for my phone. I didn't check my messages. I opened the front-facing camera. I stared at the screen and froze. The black and white cat eyes from the ritual were gone. In their place were two blood-red vertical slits. My pupils weren't round anymore. They were needle-thin, like the eyes of a predator locking onto its prey. Suddenly, rows of glowing red text began to float in my vision, flickering like a digital display. Ghost name, blood pupil. Grade, rank 9. Category, physical/symbiotic/weird. Energy, 3 months. Ability 1. Eye for an eye rule. After maintaining eye contact for a certain duration, you can ignore the opponent's rules and reflect their power back at them. If the opponent has no active rule-based ability, you can exert control over their soul. Targets will suffer blood reversal and energy dissipation until death. Ability 2. Seeing the soul, effect, can perceive the fame and energy of living beings. Insights into grades, true nature, rules, and hidden abilities of ghosts. Status, symbiotic with human. Note, energy consumption is doubled. Preliminary intelligence has awakened. Ghost thought, not bad, right? How is my power, lowly human? You should worship me. I stared at the text, stunned. In my past life, the blood pupil dragon lord was one of the strongest entities in the country, but I hadn't realized its foundation was this broken. In the coming era, the most terrifying thing about ghosts wouldn't be their strength, but their rules. If you accidentally triggered a ghost's killing rule, like looking at it or hearing its voice, you died instantly. Most people would have to die just to figure out what those rules were. But my eyes? They let me see the rules before they hit me. And if I looked back long enough, I could turn a ghost's own death sentence against it. The only thing that worried me was the preliminary intelligence note. Usually, ghosts are just mindless monsters until they reach rank 4. The fact that this thing was already talking to me inside my head was unsettling. I looked at the energy counter. 3 months. In this world, energy was the currency of the apocalypse. It was what ghosts used to grow and what humans used to survive. To get more, you had to kill, or you had to consume other ghosts. I stood up, my new eyes adjusting to the red-tinted room. The world was about to end, and I was the only one who could see it coming. Chu-Ching, that's it. I'm calling the landlady. Chen Wei yelled again. I took a deep breath, wiped the dried blood from my cheeks, and walked toward the door. It was time to start. In this twisted world, energy was everything. It birthed beasts, creatures that helped humans level up their ranks and nourished the ghosts we dared to control. Humans and ghosts were bitter enemies, yet we were inseparable. One couldn't exist without the other. It was a hopeless, deformed cycle. I focused my mind, testing the limits of my new eyes. If this lineage could mimic the record of life and death, it should be able to show me my own status. As the thought crossed my mind, the blood-red text shifted. My rank was currently non-existent. My energy was at a 3-month reserve. But the most alarming part was my yang energy, my remaining lifespan. It had plummeted to exactly 3 months. In my past life, I had 60 years of life ahead of me. Now, the price of housing a high-level ghost like the blood pupil dragon lord had drained me to the bone. I'm not your servant. The voice hissed inside my head, arrogant and cold. You're just borrowing my strength. Don't die, human. If your heart stops, I'll have to peel your skin off along with mine. I ignored the threat and clenched my fists. 3 months of life wasn't much. I could convert energy into yang to extend my time, but even then, I'd only buy myself another 3 months. If I ran out of energy entirely, the ghost would rebel and consume me instantly. To survive, I had to become an official. I needed a real rank. Suddenly, the frantic knocking at my door stopped. Sister Yun, I'm really sorry to bother you. A man's voice called out from the hallway. I don't know what's wrong with Chu-Ching. He's not answering. Then, a woman's voice joined in. Is he okay? He hasn't picked up his phone. He just went through a breakup? You don't think he did something reckless, do you? I heard the jingle of keys. The lock turned. I looked around the room. It was a disaster. There was a blood-stained fruit knife on the floor and dark red spatters across my bedding. It looked exactly like a crime scene. I didn't care about the laws of a crumbling world, but I didn't have time to deal with the police. I moved fast. I hid the knife, threw a cover over the stains, and sprinted into the bathroom. I turned the shower on just as the front door swung open. 2 people rushed inside. One was Fong Ping, a polite-looking guy with glasses who lived nearby. The other was Su Suyun, my landlady. She was in her 30s, dressed in a silk nightgown that did little to hide her elegance. I stepped out of the bathroom, wiping water from my face. I made sure my eyes looked normal, clear, curious, and confused. Fong Ping, what's going on? I asked. Why are you guys charging in here? Fong Ping gasped, clutching his chest. You're asking us? You didn't pick up the phone. You didn't answer the door. I thought you were still depressed over in Ruashua and decided to end it all. In Ruashua, I blinked, searching my memories for a few seconds before I even remembered who she was. The girl who broke my heart was a lifetime ago to me now. I drank a bit too much and passed out. I lied smoothly. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Fong Ping stared at me, blinking in disbelief. You're definitely acting weird. Since when do you say sorry to me? Did you hit your head? I ignored him and turned to Su Suyun. Sister Yun, I'm sorry for making you come all the way down here. She shook her head, her expression softening. As long as you're okay, Chu Qing. Fong Ping said you have a job interview today. Good luck. She gave me a small, encouraging smile. Thanks. I'll walk you out. I followed her to the door. As I looked at her, memories of the future flashed before my eyes. Su Suyun was wealthy and kind, but she was doomed. In my previous life, she died the moment the apocalypse began. Her body was never found, but her skin became part of a legendary ghost known as the Woman in Red. That ghost eventually became a consort to a powerful ghost lord. I didn't want that to happen. Not because I was a saint, but because the Woman in Red was an asset I wanted for myself. If I could intercept that ghost while it was still weak, I'd be unstoppable. Sister Yun, I said, my voice turning serious. She stopped and looked back. Yes. If anything strange happens in this building, anything at all, call me immediately. She paused, looking at me with a hint of suspicion. Strange situations? Chu Qing, are you trying to tell me you're giving up on finding a job? You still have to pay rent next month, you know. I didn't smile. I'm serious. Just call me. She laughed it off, thinking I was just being eccentric, and walked away. I watched her go, my mind already calculating. In this world, most people lost their humanity the moment they bonded with a ghost. They became cold, erratic, and cruel. But I remembered the words of a powerful man from my past life, a man who had reached the highest rank of unofficial. He told me that being a ghost tamer wasn't just about fighting monsters. It was a fight against the madness inside yourself. To survive the end of the world, I had to remember one thing. I was still human, and I intended to stay that way. I had to remember one thing. I was a human, not a ghost. If I forgot that, the path of an unofficial would just be a slow transformation into a monster. A king is only a king if he can control everything, not just the spirits he commands, but himself. I, Chu Qing, would always be the master. The ghost would be the slave. But the entity inside me didn't like that. The blood pupil dragon lord was an ancient, arrogant thing, and it didn't appreciate Su Siyun's dismissive tone. It reacted before I could stop it. My vision shifted. My normal eyes vanished, replaced by a pair of terrifying, blood-red pupils shaped like vertical slits. The world turned crimson. I locked onto Su Siyun. She froze. I could see the blood in her veins surging toward her brain, her heart hammering so hard against her ribs I thought it might explode. She was seconds away from dying of a brain hemorrhage. I slammed my mental will down, forcing the power back. The red faded. My eyes returned to normal. Su Siyun's heart rate slowed, but she looked dazed. She stumbled, her brain reeling from the sudden pressure, and reached out to steady herself against the wall. I grabbed her shoulder to support her, my face a mask of calm. Sister Yin, are you okay? I asked softly. She blinked, looking at me with wide, confused eyes. For a second, she thought she'd seen my eyes turn into something monstrous, but she shook it off. She probably thought it was a hallucination from her recent dieting. I'm fine, she whispered, her face pale. Just a bit of low blood sugar. Don't worry about what I said earlier. If you need help, just ask. I have to go. She hurried away, her steps unsteady. I didn't feel any satisfaction from teasing a beautiful woman. Instead, I covered one of my eyes and spoke inwardly, my voice cold and lethal. That was the first time I whispered to the thing inside me. Let it be the last. If you can't be controlled, I'll gouge my own eyes out before I let you take over. Don't forget, you only have a mind because of me. My eye flickered between black and red for 10 seconds, the ghost thrashing against its cage in fury. Eventually, it went silent. Qing, stop daydreaming. Fong Ping walked out of the apartment, looking impatient. He glanced at the spot where Su Siyun had vanished. Sister Yin is from a different world than us, man. Forget her. Are you coming to the Tianyu Entertainment interview or what? Tianyu was a local gaming and media company. For art students like us, an internship there was a lifeline in a brutal job market. I turned to him. Go ahead without me. I already found a job. What? When? Fang Ping stared at me. Just now. I pointed to a tiny, obscure ad in the corner of the morning newspaper. Asterisk, Beishan Cemetery. Security guard. Room and board included. 6,000 yuan a month plus benefits. Requirements. Must be brave and not superstitious. Asterisk. Fang Ping looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I didn't explain. I had work to do. The afternoon sun was blazing when I hopped out of the taxi, but the heat didn't touch me. I had grown used to the cold. The Beishan Cemetery sat at the foot of a massive mountain range, isolated and decaying. The iron gates were rusted, and the whole place felt like it was rotting in silence. This area was famous. It was part of the Beimang Mountains, a place where ancient kings and generals had been buried for centuries. People used to flock here hoping the royal energy would bless their families. Now, thanks to rumors of hauntings, the place was a ghost town. Even in broad daylight, it felt freezing. A young man named Su Wei ran toward me from a parked car. He looked terrified, like he didn't even want to step foot on the grass. "You're Chuqing?" he asked, breathless. The pay is exactly what was in the ad. You just need to patrol at 6 a.m. and 10:30 p.m. Take a photo to clock in. You can stay here or go home. I don't care. Just sign this. He shoved a contract at me, his eyes darting toward the graves. He was desperate to leave. I didn't care about the money or his fear. I signed my name in quick, sharp strokes. In my previous life, my first office was a paper doll maker, a low-level rank that used my art skills. But this time, I had a different plan. There were many choices for a 9th rank official, and I knew exactly which one I needed to survive. I was going to be a gravekeeper. I knew of dozens of different official roles. Each one had its own unique abilities and specialized fields. When it came to dealing with ghosts, they all had their strengths. But as the rank increased, the number of available positions thinned out. Promoting an official rank was several times harder than evolving a ghost. Some high-level ranks even required a specific low-level foundation to unlock. For example, the legendary king of Mount Tai, one of the 10 kings of hell, was a 2nd rank position. To reach it, you first had to become the Lord of Mount Tai. And to become the Lord of Mount Tai, you had to start at the 9th rank as a simple mountain dweller. Your choice of path at the very beginning determined your ultimate ceiling. Beyond combat power, the most important factor for any official was how they gathered energy. In my past life, I was a paper doll maker. My combat ability against ghosts was decent, and the path to the 8th rank was clear. But it wasn't the best choice for this life. Gathering energy as a doll maker was a nightmare. I had to fold a paper figure that looked exactly like myself, write my birth details on it, and burn it. It sounded simple, but the process was tedious. If the likeness wasn't perfect, the ritual failed. I'd waste materials and even lose the energy I already had. In my previous life, I only reached the height I did because I stumbled upon a massive opportunity at the 6th rank to switch my path. That was how I nearly became the king of the Chu River. This time, I wasn't leaving it to luck. I wanted the role with the highest possible ceiling for energy. I wanted to be a gravekeeper. In the future era of terror, many people would despise this role. They'd call it the biggest trap among the 9th rank positions. The gap between the best and worst gravekeepers was staggering. At the top, there was only one seat, the king of Bianqing. He was the man who had betrayed me and caused my failure in my past life. He started as a gravekeeper. But while there was only one king, the bottom of the barrel was crowded with failures. The job description was simple: watch over the graves. But in a world governed by a supernatural death game, nothing was ever truly simple. A gravekeeper had to contain the ghosts reviving within the tombs. Every night, during the darkest hours before dawn, I would have to ensure every malicious spirit returned to its grave. If I kept the peace, I would automatically gain energy at sunrise. The more ghosts in the cemetery, and the higher their quality, the more energy I would receive. There was no upper limit. If I could control the spirits, I could basically earn energy while I slept. For a normal person, this was impossible. Most beginners were killed by the very things they were supposed to guard. But I wasn't normal. I had years of memories and the powers of the blood pupil. There was another reason I chose this. In my past life, I had entered a terrifying, ancient secret realm. Many high-ranking experts died there. Inside a hidden hall, I found a chaotic, ancient mural. Most of it was a blur, but I remembered one detail clearly. The mural highlighted a few ninth-rank roles, and the gravekeeper was at the center of it all. It was the foundation of my greatest enemy, Ding Xie, the man who became the king of Bianqing. The shop on the left after you enter is yours, Su Wei said, snapping me back to the present. It's a little incense and candle store. There's a bed and some supplies inside. If you don't like them, buy your own. I've left the numbers for the suppliers if you want to sell wreaths or paper money. Any profit you make is yours. Just show up at the office 2 kilometers away on the 1st of the month to get your salary. The young man rattled off the instructions, handed me the keys, and practically dove into his car. He sped away without setting a single foot inside the cemetery gates. I didn't mind. I unlocked the heavy iron gates and stepped inside. I stopped after a few paces. Now I understood why he was so terrified. Beishan Cemetery was built into a desolate hill. Beyond the rows of empty plots at the base, a small mountain rose about 300 meters high. According to the signs, the higher the plot, the more expensive it had been. But the place was decaying. Most of the wealthy families had moved their ancestors' remains years ago when the feng shui supposedly turned sour. The emptiness made the air feel heavy. The location was actually good. It was near the Yellow River and connected to the main road leading to the city outskirts. There was plenty of room for expansion. I didn't know much about traditional feng shui, but as I looked around, a faint gray mist drifted into my vision. Normal eyes couldn't see it. Under my gaze, it was unmistakable. It was Yin energy, ghostly qi. The era of terror wasn't supposed to officially begin for another 2 days, but signs were already appearing. Just like my own transformation, some places were awakening early. This cemetery was one of them. Judging by how thick the energy was, something here had already started feeding on human life. Someone had died here recently. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. From a gravekeeper's perspective, this place was perfect. It was massive, the terrain was varied, and the energy was potent. There were plenty of graves here for me to harvest. The future capacity of this place was massive. It was large enough to house plenty of supernatural entities without those mindless, early-stage ghosts killing each other off. But the best part was the gift that came with the territory. A malicious ghost was already here. I didn't know its potential or talent yet, and I certainly didn't plan on making it my primary tomb ghost. I already had someone else in mind for that role. However, for a gravekeeper, the more ghosts under my command, the better. To me, these weren't just terrifying spirits. They were living, breathing, walking ATM machines of Yin energy. There was a catch, though. A tomb ghost is a spirit completely bound and controlled by the gravekeeper's Yin pool. The downside is that they are tethered to the cemetery. Once they leave these grounds, they lose most of their power and aren't much stronger than an average human. But within the cemetery walls, their combat power is formidable. Even with my blood pupil lineage, choosing the right first ghost was critical. I moved deeper into the cemetery, my boots crunching on the gravel as I approached the area where the Yin energy was thickest. Before I could even summon my power to investigate the source, a sharp sound echoed from the side. Meow. I turned my head. A black cat was perched on a dilapidated tombstone overgrown with nameless vines. Its orange-green eyes watched me with curious intensity. I could see a faint wisp of Yin energy swirling around its body. This wasn't a normal cat. It was a demon cat, a creature that had survived contact with the supernatural and begun to awaken by consuming ghostly energy. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I squatted down and reached out a hand. "Come here, little guy." The black cat looked surprised. It wasn't afraid of humans at all. It leapt from the tombstone and padded over to me. It was small, maybe 30 centimeters long, and skin and bones. Its fur was pitch black, but in the afternoon sun, it shimmered with a deep, reddish hue. Ancient texts say that a true Xian cat is black with a reddish tint under the sun, a creature capable of warding off evil. I stroked its fur. The cat's body, which had been trembling slightly, suddenly relaxed. It let out a soft, rhythmic purr. "Hey, little one," I whispered. "Someone died here recently, didn't they?" The moment I spoke, the cat stiffened. Its body began to shake violently again, like it was shivering from a fever. It seemed to understand exactly what I was saying. I kept stroking its matted fur, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Don't be afraid. I know it wasn't you. You just happened to be there when that thing was feeding, right? You managed to snatch a few leftovers." Meow. The cat let out a piercing, blood-curdling shriek. The docile pet was gone. Its pupils shrunk into tiny needles as it stared in pure terror, not at me, but at something standing right behind me. A bone-chilling cold washed over my back. Even though the sun was high in the sky, the air felt like ice. I narrowed my eyes but didn't turn around immediately. The killing rules of ghosts are unpredictable. I didn't know what kind of entity was lurking behind me. The cat's eyes went wide with horror. In that instant, I let my own transformation take over. My normal eyes shifted, turning a deep, bruised black and blood red. My pupils became vertical slits, locking onto the cat's reflection to see what was behind me. Then, I slowly turned around. A phantom figure stood there. Through my blood-red vision, I saw a woman in a tattered, rotting white dress. Her long, withered gray hair hung down, completely masking her face. My blood pupil ability kicked in. Information flooded my mind as I locked onto her. Entity, faceless ghost. Rank, grade 9. Category, earthbound spirit/een beast. Age, 9 months, 17 days. Rule, fear projection. It creates terrifying atmospheres and scenarios to weaken a victim's will. When the victim's sanity hits a breaking point and they are paralyzed by fear, they see the ghost's true face. This triggers the face swap death. Ability, Ghost Wall. It creates a labyrinthine illusion to trap victims and drain their resolve. Condition, cannot leave Beishan Cemetery. Within the cemetery, its recovery speed is doubled and its energy consumption is halved. You're not actually scared of this thing, are you? The arrogant voice of the Dragon Lord echoed in my head. Though, I suppose its look matches our aesthetic. I twitched. The Dragon Lord's lineage made dealing with these rules easier, but there was a problem. If this thing didn't have a face, how was I supposed to look it in the eye to trigger my own suppression? The silence was deafening. The sun beat down on the cemetery, yet we stood in a pocket of freezing air. The black cat had bolted, watching us from a safe distance with wide, terrified eyes. Time ticked by. I could feel a creeping sense of dread rising in my chest. It wasn't because I was weak-willed. It was the faceless ghost's rule taking effect. Even without a scary scene, its mere presence was forcing my body to feel fear. It was a grade 9 entity. If I didn't counter its rules soon, I'd be dead the moment I saw what was under that hair. I needed it to look at me. But how do you stare down something without eyes? I didn't panic. As long as I understood the rules, I held the upper hand. If I couldn't subdue it, I could always retreat. I looked at the figure hidden behind the shroud of hair and let out a soft, mocking laugh. "You poor, pathetic thing," I said, my voice cutting through the cold. "Don't you even have a face of your own?" On the nearby tombstone, the black cat looked at me like I was the one who had lost my mind. I had just insulted a ghost. Even the faceless ghost, a creature with almost no intelligence, seemed to freeze for a second. Then, it exploded with rage. Low-level ghosts are like wild animals. They can't think, but they can sense emotions. This thing's entire killing rule was based on the victim's fear. But for me, it felt nothing but mocking disdain. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the North Mountain Cemetery shifted. It felt like a war was about to break out. The bright noon sun vanished, replaced by a heavy, artificial overcast sky. Everything turned pitch black. The wind began to howl, and that creeping sense of dread became a physical weight, sticking to me like a shadow. I didn't care. My blood-red eyes remained locked on the ghost. I even reached out, trying to poke its shimmering, translucent body. My hand passed right through, meeting only a soul-chilling cold. It was a land-bound spirit, a ghost without a physical form. I pulled my hand back and smirked. How about looking at my face instead? Back in school, I was considered a real heartthrob. This face should be exactly your type, right? I was quoting the blood pupil dragon lord's own arrogant words. Behind me, the black cat watched with wide eyes, looking at me like I was dancing in a minefield. I leaned in closer, slowly bringing my forehead toward the space where the ghost's face should have been. We were so close our skin, or lack thereof, almost touched. "Take a look at my eyes," I whispered. "See how red they are? Like rubies. Don't you want to gouge them out and keep them for yourself?" I blinked my crimson eyes. I ignored the wave of embarrassment and resistance coming from the Dragon Lord's consciousness in my mind. It looked like I was just messing around, but my heart was racing. Dealing with ghosts is like walking a tightrope. One wrong move and you're dead. The Dragon Lord's power required eye contact to trigger. The problem was, this thing had no eyes. But ghosts don't just see with eyeballs, they perceive. I was testing the limits of my lineage. If it worked, I'd win. If not, I'd have to run for my life. It turned out my eyes were quite the distraction. In the pitch-black void of the ghost's illusion, my pupils glowed with a predatory light. As the fear in the air reached its peak, I felt it, a flicker of consciousness. A strange, disjointed gaze locked onto my face. Specifically, it locked onto my glowing red eyes. A distorted, raspy voice echoed in the air. "Beautiful face. Eyes, give them to me." Instantly, the crimson light in my eyes flared. The Dragon Lord's rule triggered. I counted the seconds in my head. Against a grade 9 ghost, the activation time was less than 2 seconds. The potential of this lineage was terrifying. The faceless ghost began to tremble violently. My rule was simple: an eye for an eye. It didn't just grant me immunity to the ghost's fear-based attack. It reflected that power back at the source with double the intensity. The ghost collapsed to its knees. The fear it had tried to inflict on me was now drowning it. In its perception, my red eyes filled its entire world, threatening to swallow it whole. It buried its head in its arms, hiding behind its long, matted hair. "No, no more face. Don't take my face," it wailed. I felt a surge of predatory instinct. I knew that with a single thought, I could end it. I could have the Dragon Lord swallow this thing and harvest its own energy. It was a rare find, a ghost born before the true apocalypse began. But I hesitated. I didn't want to consume it yet. This thing was a land-bound spirit, and its ability to generate fear was top tier. If I kept it here in the cemetery, it would be a permanent energy farm, a perfect little worker for my future plans. I leaned down. Even though I couldn't touch it, I mimicked the motion of patting its head. "Relax," I said in a soothing voice. "As long as you're obedient, I won't peel your face off. If you perform well, I might even find you a face you actually like. Deal." The ghost didn't have the brains to understand the words, but it felt my intent. Its translucent body shivered and shrank, signaling absolute submission. Ghosts are like beasts, they don't want to die. The illusion broke. The noon sun returned, hot and bright, washing away the gloom. The light hit my messy black hair, softening my cold expression. I stood up and looked toward the tombstone. The black cat was shaking, but it didn't dare run. I whistled, and it leaped back into my arms. I held the cat and looked out over the North Mountain Cemetery. "From now on," I murmured, "no one is going to bully you guys." Just then, the heavy iron gates of the cemetery creaked and rattled. I turned around. Fong Ping was peeking through the bars, waving at me. "Hey, I came to check out your new workplace," he shouted. "And look who I brought along." I looked past the rusty gate. Standing next to Fong Ping was a girl about our age. She was dressed in a Chanel sundress and Valentino rock-stud heels that shimmered in the light. She carried a caramel-colored Hermes bag. I searched my memories for a moment before the name surfaced. And Ruashua, my ex-girlfriend from this timeline.